This chapter introduces a framework I developed with Ben Hitchings, principal of Green Heron Planning, LLC, to help communities and organizations make sense of the many forces that are driving or will drive change. Subsequent chapters will cover how to use this framework to prepare for and respond to disruptive change. Our approach begins with a framework to organize and understand the macro issues and trends that are impacting us now or may impact us in the future. We organize these drivers of change into 4 broad categories: social, technological, economic, and environmental. And the diagram shows 4 representative drivers for each category. For example, aging population, social determinants of health for social drivers; artificial intelligence, smart cities for technological ones; automation and remote work for economic drivers; and finally, climate change, energy, and resource depletion for environmental drivers. 3 key points. There are many points of overlap and interconnections between different drivers. And like a meteor shower approaching Earth, these drivers vary in their stage of development and impact on communities. So that some are well established, for example, aging population. Others are emerging, for example, artificial intelligence, while still others may still be out in the horizon, for example, autonomous vehicles. And we think the challenge for communities is to address these drivers in a proactive, integrated way rather than a piecemeal, reactive one, which is a norm, if they're to successfully deal with change. What I'm going to do next is share in a little more detail one example from each category. So I'll start with a social driver, aging population, which is a worldwide phenomenon. By 2050, the world's 60 years and older population will double to 2.1 billion. People 80 years or older are expected to triple from 2020 to 2050 to reach 426 million. And then in the U.S., the U.S. Census projects that 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older by 2030, and by 2034 will outnumber children for the first time. And this marks a change from a youth-dependent to an age-dependent population. So some of the implications for communities are increasing healthcare costs, retirement costs. We've been seeing this. But they're not all negative. There are positive economic, social contributions older adults can make. And there's a need then to adapt physical and social infrastructure to promote health, productivity, and social engagement of older adults. Moving on to smart cities, a technological driver. The Internet of Things is changing the way cities manage systems like transportation and energy, provide services, and interact with their citizens. And this is closely related to other technological drivers, like artificial technology, but also has key implications for social, economic, and environmental drivers as well. This driver is still in its relatively early stages of development and application, and you see cities like Barcelona, Singapore, Vienna, and in the US, New York, Orlando, and Philadelphia as some of the leaders in applying this technology. So what are the implications for communities? There's potential benefits beginning to be realized. More sustainable systems like energy, mobility, water, and waste. And there's opportunities to engage citizens. For example, in Barcelona, the Decidim, We Decide online decision-making platform to engage citizens in making decisions. But there are concerns about the digital divide, digital equity, control of and access to data, and things like cybersecurity and privacy. So it's a mixed bag at this point, and we're still looking at how it will all play out. But what I think the key is to put people first and harness technologies to support community values and realize community needs. Moving on to an economic driver. The circular economy is an emerging economic driver, an alternative to the linear economic model, which is one of resource extraction, production, distribution, consumption, and then waste. So what this idea of the circular economy does, it emphasizes repurposing of waste as a valuable economic resource through reuse, repair, refurbishing, and recycling. And this, in turn, has positive effects on environmental drivers such as resource depletion, climate change, and energy. This concept first emerged in the 1970s, but it's been accelerating in recent years. And there's certainly benefits and opportunities to be derived. Environmental benefits obviously include reduced raw material consumption, waste, greenhouse gas emissions. Economic benefits, increased innovation, job creation, reduced consumer costs. And then there are opportunities to transform the way business is done, municipal operations, construction, and real estate business practices. And one of the leaders in this is Glasgow, Scotland. We'll return that to their circular economy initiative later in the course. Moving on to climate change, an environmental driver that's the existential environmental threat of our times. As we know, this is largely caused by human activity from sources such as fossil fuel consumption, particularly the building and transportation sectors, other human activities such as deforestation and agriculture, including methane emissions. And it's important to note that transportation is the #1 carbon emitter in the U.S. So what are the implications of climate change for communities? It's certainly an equity and health issue. Socially vulnerable populations, including low-income communities, communities of color, children and older adults are particularly hard hit by climate change. And to address climate change, communities need to address both mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and adaptation, preparing for the impacts and reducing their risks. And maintaining and planting trees is a particularly powerful climate change strategy because it addresses both mitigation and adaptation. That concludes Chapter 4. In our next chapter, we'll explore emerging best practices being used by communities to address drivers of change.